Tēnā koutou katoa morena. Greetings to you all and good morning. Nice to be back. When was I here last? Sometime last year, I think. Yeah, so good to be back. You good? 1 to 10, are you good? 10 being great? Who's 7 and above? Who's 3 and below? I've got to fly back. First, my wife, Ruby, flew out to India this morning from here. I came up yesterday. We came up yesterday, and then I fly back down to Whanganui tomorrow morning into the gale. Oh, I'm such a nervous flyer. Who's a nervous flyer here? Oh, there's 1 or 2 of us. It's terrible. Anyway. Friends, so thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me back to participate with you. It does mean a lot. I was looking forward to this. I just love being a part of your circle, being a part of your company, and worshipping. And then I also have the added privilege of sharing my heart. And I do have something that I'd like to share with you this morning. When I was pondering what I should do, I think I went through 5 drafts, 5 different messages on the text that was given to me. And I think I've settled on the right one. I hope so. If I haven't, throw the marbles this direction, okay? But what I want to do this morning, if it's okay by you, is give you a talk and not a teaching session. I mean, there is a place for teaching sessions, and I do them, and Jonathan does them even better. But I feel just to share a talk, in other words, raise an issue for your consideration. And you'll get the sense of this as we go through. So the text that I was given, it's in chapter 9, and it goes from verse 52 right down to 10, verse 37. So all up about 52 verses. This is what Jonathan, in his generosity, he gave to me. And I thought, what the heck do I do with that? You know, like, there's about 10 messages, and I once emailed Jonathan. I said, so there's about 10 messages in there. And so I said to Jonathan through the week, I'm not going to stand up, time allow. We don't have the time to read the entire 52 verses. So he got back and said, well, just pick out some of the verses that you know are pivotal to what you want to talk about. But I have to kind of give the backdrop to this kind of text. And so basically it goes like this. Jesus is an interaction with a number of people in this entire passage. And first off, he's talking to 3 separate individuals. And these 3 separate individuals are kind of wannabes, maybe becoming Christ followers. Then Jesus moves over and he talks to real Christians, those who are being sent out to the lost. And there's 70 of them. So that's the next part of the text. And then finally, right at the end of the passage, Jesus is talking to a lawyer. And he's talking about the Good Samaritan. Who here knows the story of the Good Samaritan? Most of us in this room. One of the most well-known parables. Okay, so I kind of looked at this entire passage, and I thought that, you know, not everything that is written in this passage is written to us. It's written for us, but it's not always written to us. I mean, Jesus says some things to some individuals, and they're for them. They're not for us. There is a part of this text that it says to the 70 that if you're in the company of snakes and scorpions, don't worry. Pick them up. And even if they bite you, she'll be right, you know. And I looked at that and I thought, well, that's written to them, but is it written to us? And you know, I don't know if you heard recently in the United States, there was a pastor by the name of Jamie Coots. Probably the name goes with what he did. But Jamie Coots, and what Jamie did is he brought a snake to church, as you do. And he brought the snake to the church, and he went up and he quoted this verse, and the snake bit him, and he refused. Did anyone read this? And he refused medical treatment, and he died. And apparently there are 125 snake churches in America. Snake churches. So I don't know, Jonathan, if it gets boring around here, you know. But there are 125. Now, I think Jesus said that to them, but it doesn't mean to say he's saying it to us. Can we have a sigh of relief on that one? Yeah. What I did with this passage was that I wanted to see if there was a thread in this passage, a kind of a weaving thread throughout the entire passage. And I think I saw one. I'm just not too sure if you'll like it. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. But that's your problem. So let me just read out some verses that I saw, and we'll see where we go. So if I pick out, say, for example, in Luke chapter 9, verse 59, it says this. To another person, Jesus said, "Follow me." "Master," he replied, "let me go and bury my father." In verse 60, Jesus said, "Well, let the dead bury their dead. You go and announce God's kingdom." Now, that's a bit of a strange verse, let the dead bury their own dead, but I'm sure some of you are aware that in the 1st century AD, when a Jewish person died, they underwent 2 burials. Are you aware of this? In other words, the body was put into a tomb, and then a year later, a family member would go into the tomb and scrape the bones up and put it in a special casket and place that casket in another part of the tomb. And so basically what this guy is saying, well, Jesus, I could become one of your Christ followers, but I've been designated to gather the bones up in a year's time. So I'll pass for now, can't make it, but I'll get back to you. And Jesus saw straight away that this guy was kind of fobbing him off. He was kind of doing an excuse-making exercise. Are you aware of that? And then Jesus says to this, this person, he says, let the dead bury the dead, and I've just explained that. And then Jesus says, but hey, if to be my disciple is to go and announce. Go and announce, speak up. Tell other people about me. So that's the first part of the thread. And then if you come with me to chapter 10 and verse 10 and verse 9, Jesus is saying in verse 8, if you go into a town as a sent one and they welcome you, eat what is provided. Then in verse 9 it says, heal the sick who are there and say to them, God's kingdom has come close to you. In other words, in that verse, Jesus is saying, for you to be a sent one, it is again for you to speak up and say to them. Now, at this point, I'm not too sure about you, but at this point, some people in the group, they begin to shuffle in their seats because they have a sense of where I'm heading. Some people begin to look at the exits. And some of the parents here begin to think, maybe I should go and check up on my kids. In other words, people at this point may have a sense that where I'm heading is that I want to talk about the E word. Tell the person next to you what that E word is. Tell the person. What's the E word? Evangelism. Now, lock eyes, people, come to moi. When I talk about evangelism in Christian circles these days, the response is overwhelmingly negative. No, it's true. So I'm just here this morning to raise an issue. But when I talk about evangelism in all sorts of circles these days, a common retort, a common reply from Christians is this. They say to me, oh, Mick, look, that speech act, twice Jesus said to people, say something, speak up, tell them about me. But a common kind of response, retort, reply back to me when I raise the topic of evangelism from Christians is that they say, Mick, look, I can't do the speech act. I'm not good at words. I'm not that confident. I can't string my sentences together. I'm a wee bit shy. I'm very shy. So look, when it comes to doing the speech act, the evangelism, the proclamation evangelism, hey, count me out. But then they say, don't get me wrong, Mick. Then they say, I am about promoting the gospel of Jesus Christ. Yes, I want to do that. But I will promote the gospel of Jesus Christ through my Christian behavior. In other words, through my acts of kindness, through my deeds, through my actions. I like the Good Samaritan story, they say. I like that part where the guy was about his business in life and he saw someone in need, so he stopped and did what he could do. And so Christians say to me, that's what I'll do. I'll promote the gospel through my good actions, through my good deeds, and through my behavior. But when it comes to the speech thing, zip, count me out. Now look, in part, I get what the people are saying. But unfortunately, Jesus doesn't allow you and me to make that move. Because in Luke chapter 10 and verse 9, as I read, Jesus says, as you go and cure the sick, there's the Good Samaritan bit. There's the good deed of kindness, curing the sick, being there for troubled people. And then Jesus says, as you go to cure, also say to them. Yes? So at this point, some of you are going, well, Mick, okay, you're going to talk about evangelism. You've already used up half your time. We're nearly done. Just do what you have to do. And my much-needed latte is soon to be, So when it comes to evangelism, when was the last time you witnessed to someone and you spoke up? I tell you, there would be a small percentage in the room this morning. Now, I'm not here to hit you over the head. That's not what I like to do. I partly get the reaction against evangelism today. Christians, when you talk about evangelism with Christians, they feel guilty. Because they know deep down they're not doing it. But they feel powerless because they don't know how to do it. So they fall into the guilt, powerlessness trap. So that's Christians. They don't want to go there when it comes to proclamation evangelism. And then, of course, non-Christians, they definitely don't want to go there because they're scared they're going to get clobbered and judged and coerced and manipulated. So they don't want to go there. I, though, personally think there's something else at work when it comes to proclamation evangelism. And it goes like this. You see, I tend to think that what has happened with proclamation evangelism is that we have catastrophized it. You know, do you know the word to catastrophize? You know, when you catastrophize it, you magnify it. You make it far bigger than what it actually is. You actually turn something into a monster. And who wants to go near a monster? You actually, as soon as someone raises the topic of evangelism, people automatically think of nightmare scenarios and worst possible outcomes. And so they don't want to go there. I mean, even in Christian circles, we have so abnormalized evangelism. Are you agreeing with me this morning? Was this too much at, 10 o'clock? Can you get what I'm saying here? We've so abnormalized it, made it abnormal. So what I want to do this morning is to normalize it. To just normalize it. I mean, every single person on planet Earth carries a message to other people. Some people carry the message that, life is a competition and you got to be in to win. That's their message that they carry to other people. Other people carry the message that life sucks. Can't wait till I die. Other people carry the message that, they're a victim. And there are a whole lot of bullies out there, and they build this victim narrative around themselves. Every single person carries a message to others. To carry a message to others is normal. And it's just that Jesus comes to us and he says, I have the best message in town that you can carry to others. But it's so normal. I've got to show you what this looks like. So, I was on a plane a couple of years ago. Well, I'm on the plane a lot during the year, but this particular flight was a couple of years ago. And I don't know if I've told you this story, but I got into my seat, and then these big military guys, they just, have I told you this? They just came onto the, and their thighs were as big as my torso, and they got on, and some were in gear, full gear, and other guys, they were in kind of casual gear. And then one of these guys sat down next to me, planted his, and and I had to squeeze over to the window, because the whole chair was being expanded. And then the plane took off, and around his right wrist was a metal bangle. And I thought, you'd need the muscles to carry that thing, and I kept looking at his bangle, and I thought, how does he get this thing off and on? I just kept looking at his bangle. So I thought, stuff it after 20 minutes. So I turned to him and I said, mate, I've been looking at your bangle. He gave me a weird look at that point. I've been looking at your bangle and I'm wondering, how the heck do you get that thing off? And he just sort of slightly manipulated it and it came off, you see. Wow, then, we were mates, and so I started to ask him a whole lot of questions. I asked him about 300 questions. I kept thinking, just questions, So you're in the army, and where do you serve, and where do you go, and where have you done a tour of duty, a deployment, have you been wounded, what are your weapons? I just rifled, no pun intended. I just threw all of these kind of questions, And then as he was responding me and sharing the message that he carries, the life story that he's got, which is really normal, I began to think, hold on, Mick, I'm also in an army. And I've also got a commander. And actually, I've done a few deployments in my time. And actually, I've got a few wounds to show for it. So I thought, turn to this bloke. And I said, yeah, I'm in an army too. And he looked at me like you skinny white guy, And I said, oh yeah, I got a commander and his name is Jesus Christ. And I said, I've done a few deployments in South Auckland and I've got some scars to show for it. And I've done a tour of duty up in Asia and and I take orders. And I told him my military story. And it's part of authentically me. And I wasn't trying to be clever. It's me. This is what I witnessed to. I witnessed to who I am. I have done those things. That's how I do see my life. And then he started to feel a little bit unawkward. So I changed the topic because I wasn't trying to do a number. I was just being normal. I was genuinely sharing my story with him. I was on a plane just last week. And as these little planes head for the earth, my nervousness takes over. And I grabbed a seat in front of me. And this woman next to me, she said, oh, you're a bit nervous flyer? And I said, yeah. And she started to talk to me. And she told me that she was in the military. And I thought, here I go again, which I did. I'm just trying to say that, and that this is just normal. But of course, I know that some of you are seated there and you're thinking, oh no, Mick, I'll never do what you do. I'll never do that with a stranger on an aeroplane or on a train or on a bus or whatever. No way. I mean, and anyway, Mick, look at you. You're fleet of foot. You're good on your feet. Arguably, you've got the gift of the gab. You're a bit of a street fighter. You can kind of do this, verbal combat. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a natural, and that's what you're thinking. And you're thinking, I'm not like you, Mick. So I don't want to do what you do. And do you know what I say? You're absolutely right. You're not like me. And nor are you meant to be like me. Absolutely. So when you get on that plane next, you just relax, But you don't have to be who I am. But I just wanted to share that story to normalize it. See, what I have learned is this speech act of proclamation evangelism, yes, it is messy and it is embarrassing. Can you relate to this? And you do make mistakes, absolutely. But it's also an adventure. And you have to do this on-the-spot decision-making. When I was with that army guy, on-the-spot decision-making. Should I tell him that I'm also in an army? It's just that our weapons are different. And I did say that. Now, that's an adventure. And you see, this proclamation evangelism, it's also amazing. It's amazing how God can take the garbled words that come out of your mouth and he can turn them into magic in the heart and mind of another person. It's absolutely amazing. And when it comes to this proclamation evangelism, look, people, it is also good for you. Hopefully it'll be good for others. But it's also good for you. I heard the story of this guy, and when he was aged 11, his parents, they fell out of love and they fell into hate. His parents, they did a runner, deserted him. He then had to be raised by his grandparents. But because of the desertion of his parents, he just experienced that kind of overwhelming sense of abandonment. And then depressive episodes began to take over in his life. And then he matured into this young adult. He fell in love with this girl. They decided to get married. And then she died prematurely. Young, just prior to the wedding, which tipped him over the edge even more. This is the guy called Bill. And then he found out he had a bit of a leadership quality about him, and so he enlisted and trained to be a military officer. And then the First World War came, and he went over and did his stuff in the First World War. And then he came back, but by this time he was starting to elbow bend a wee bit too much. He was drinking too much, and then and by this time, by the way, he had already married another person by the name of Lois. And then when he got back from the First World War, he thought, I'll become a lawyer and an accountant, and he enrolled at Yale University. And by this time, he was knocking back more booze. And then he had to sit his exams, but he was so intoxicated at the time of his last exam, he didn't turn up to the exam room, so that derailed that, couldn't go through with the exam program and so forth and so on. And then he just started up a number of businesses. By this time, he was an alcoholic. And then he had a group of friends, and they were super concerned about him, and he kept spiraling into these episodes of depression. And one day a person said, come along to our small group. And he came along to a small group that Jonathan was talking about before, came along to a small group and met these Christians, and he had this encounter with God through Jesus Christ. And as he committed and gave his allegiance to Jesus, he said to Jesus, I will not touch another drop in my entire life. 6 months later, he tried to start up a business, and that fell over, and he was so disappointed because their financial kind of situation was perilous that he headed for the Mayflower Hotel. And as he walked up to the bar to get a drink, he said to his God, God, I'm about to have another drink, and it'll be the death of me. And then he heard a whisper. And this whisper said, that inaudible whisper, God speaks. God still communicates. He heard this whisper, and the whisper said, go find another alcoholic. Leave the bar. Go find another alcoholic. He went and saw Bob, went to Bob, sat down, and for about 5 hours, Bill just told Bob, a non-Christian, Bill told Bob the message that he was carrying. And Bill left the room, and he felt so good. He just felt so good, and he never touched a drop again. The point being was that telling other people the message that you're carrying is good for you. I mean, Bill went outside, but it strengthened him on the inside. It was good for him, for Bill. It was good for Bob. Bob did become a Christian, but it was also good for Bill. And evangelism is good for you. When I got off that plane, I'm still living off that. I'm still feeding off that. It was good for me. So I got to wrap this up. And you're probably thinking at this point, oh, Mick, okay, you're about to give us, the tricks of the trade. 3 steps that you can take. Absolutely not. When I thought about this message and I was preparing it in the last couple of weeks, let me be frank and honest with you, something that, I'm just unusual at. But let me be frank and honest. I do not know how you should do this stuff. I have racked my brains. I do not know how you should do this proclamation evangelism. I don't know. But what I do know is that you have got to enter into the struggle of discovering how you should do this. And my question is, have you? And my question is, will you? I'm so glad. I've been on both sides. In 1976, when I was in my early 20s and not yet a Christ follower, I had these Christ followers doing proclamation evangelism with me. And I had to enter into the struggle as a non-Christian person of inquiring about this stuff. I'm so glad that I did. But since then, the role has been flipped. And now I have to enter into the struggle of how do I, as Mick Duncan, proclaim the gospel to other people. And how I do it is not meant to be how you do it. But I don't know how you need to do it. But you must enter into that struggle and discover what that looks like for you. Is that good? Is that good? Is that right? Is that right? Let me pray. Lord Jesus, my prayer for these dear people here this morning is that as they are sent into their neighbourhoods, and as they are sent into their workplaces, and as they are sent into their extended families, Lord, that these dear folk here, they will not lose their tongues. Lord, that these folk at GCC will not lose their nerve. May it be, Lord, that these dear folk at GCC discover, enabled by your Spirit, how they are to speak up and proclaim the gospel that doesn't leave a bad aftertaste in their mouths, but that can be amazing and fun and adventurous and normal. May that be so, Jesus. In your name we pray. And we all said,